What is up, guys? Welcome to episode 24 of the Inner Alchemy podcast. Okay, so my algorithm is buzzing right now with people disseminating the Wizard Liz situation. And obviously I spoke about it last time, so I wanted to revisit the topic. Obviously I don't want my channel turning into my podcast turning into like a gossip tea dissemination channel, but I do feel like there is a lot of what's the word a lot of opportunities for us to learn from this cautionary tale. I'm not kind of throwing shade or hate at Liz. As I said in the last transmission that I did on this subject, I actually like Liz, and the more I've kind of sat with this and researched this and looked at the content around it, I actually start to like her more and more. Do I think that she's right about everything? Obviously not. She's made some massive schoolgirl errors, but I do kind of have a little bit of soft spot for her. But yes, incidentally, back to the point I made about gossip, I actually do think that the term gossip and its negative associations with the idea of women kind of coming together to disseminate tea, to, share information and cautionary lessons, has a lot of misogyny baked into it. Like, I do think that gossip, or whatever we want to call it going forward, is how women protected each other. It's how women came together to share information and to congregate and build strength in numbers so that they could strategize against problematic people like abusers and things like that before going public. Like, when people kind of act like, oh, if you've got a problem with me, you come and talk to me directly, don't talk about behind my back. It's just like, well, if the person that you're having a problem with, if there's a massive power differential between the person that you have the problem with and the person that's been harmed, sometimes you can't come to that person directly. Sometimes, if that person's abusive or manipulative, you need to maybe disseminate it with somebody else, a trusted support friend or family member, a therapist, whoever. And you might actually find in doing so that other people have had that same issue with that person, and then you can build support and strength in numbers. So the demonization of gossip is actually I think a misogynistic tool to disempower women and to make us feel ashamed for, learning, using different examples as cautionary tales, okay? Because being a woman on this planet, in this plane, is amazing, but also a very vulnerable experience, okay? We are extremely vulnerable as the mothers of humanity, and there are certain risks associated with being female, okay? Because what we have to bring to the world, we literally decide which bloodlines get carried forward, is extremely powerful. And so that has been extremely targeted on the planet. So whatever lies the enemy wants to use to try and disempower us, it doesn't surprise me. So yeah, I'm not gonna let's not let anyone gaslight us into not discussing topics of the day and how we can learn from them. Okay, so as always, I have a lot of notes, so it's going to be another long transmission, so make sure you got your tea and let's get into it. Okay, so first off, I'm not saying that Liz is responsible for everything that's happened to her. She's not responsible for being cheated on multiple times as it emerges. She's not responsible for being manipulated, abused, physically abused. As I understand, Landon's also made AI porn of her. She's not responsible for these things. Having said that, she has made a number of schoolgirl errors, and obviously she is still very young. She's only 27, and as I said in the last transmission, as far as I'm concerned, if you're in your mid-20s, you're still a kid. Like, your prefrontal cortex is still not fully developed. I think it starts developing around 26. It probably varies depending on person to person. But I think for somebody who's experienced as much trauma and narcissistic abuse as someone like Liz, she's probably still going to be in a state where it's going to take her a little bit longer to develop that healthy discernment. Does that mean that she shouldn't be giving advice online? No, I don't. I think she has the right to give advice online, but I think what people who are listening to her need to bear in mind is we need to stop putting people who are giving advice online on pedestals, because firstly, a lot of what people aren't showing us the full story. Okay, there's a lot that people confront online where their life behind the scenes may not actually be embodying what they're displaying online, and this, obviously this is where she's losing a lot of support, because people are saying she's not living what she's actually teaching. She hasn't fully embodied the teachings. She knows them in theory, but she's not truly embodying it. There are distortions. There are heavy distortions in a lot of what she's teaching. And that is why, one of the reasons why she's managed to get herself into this mess, okay? Because when she's just focusing on a man showing you how much he loves you by how much money he spends on you, that in itself is completely incomplete, okay? Yes, if a man's not willing to spend any money on you, he probably either doesn't have any money, in which you should leave him alone, or secondly, he doesn't like you like that. He's not interested. Like, he'll take what he can get, but he's not that into you. That in itself has some truth to it, but it's not the whole complete picture, okay? And she's obviously gone, jumped feet in with somebody who love bombed her, but through basically spending a lot of money on her, and abandoned all other standards that she needed to be using to vet someone, and just decided to, jump feet first into marriage and starting a family with somebody that she'd barely even known 6 months. Okay, this is incredibly dangerous advice. Okay, now I don't think she was actually giving this advice. I haven't watched all her videos to be able to say whether, she said that it's okay to jump in with somebody, after 6 months. I understand that a lot of women in the level up space and that kind of sprinkle, Shira 7 and influencers that were inspired by content creators in that whole pink pill movement have historically dealt with men who were dusty, who basically had no money and weren't willing to invest in anything, weren't willing to invest in them, support them, were making them carry all the financial load of the relationship, and also men who were emotionally non-committal or unavailable. So if you've been going from men that will drag you along, use you as a placeholder, use you to help them get their own lives in order in terms of career and finances, and then once they get to a certain level in their career and their finances, then they dump you and upgrade on you to a younger model or whoever, which was the thing that Shira 7 was trying to teach women to avoid, then I can understand why women would swing from that experience to then going, a man who really wants you will pursue you hard, he'll spend money on you, and he'll know right away if he wants to marry you. So if he's straight up from the jump being like, yeah, let's get married, let's, start a family, they're like, wow, he must really love me. If you haven't lived much life, like Liz hasn't, you don't understand that this is a tactic that narcissists and other abusive types of men will do. In the beginning, they will love bomb you and they will quickly try and accelerate the relationship so that by the time, because they can't keep that mask on for long, okay? 3 to 6 months and you will start to notice if you're dealing with a narcissist or sociopath, okay? And I do think that Landon is showing clear signs of being at least some kind of narcissist, or heavy narcissistic traits, possibly even sociopathic, or pathological liar, something, okay? Some type of cluster B personality type. So these types of men will love bomb the shit out of you, will try and move the relationship, rush you down the aisle, try to baby trap you as soon as possible so that they can get you locked down. Okay, that's not because they love you, it's because they've targeted you for whatever reason, whether it's money, status, sex, validation, being associated with you, whatever reason. Okay, these types are they're not rational, okay? They don't behave like normal God-sourced, heart-centered human being, okay? A lot of these people are hosting negative entities that are parasitic and need to feed, okay? I've watched my previous videos talking about narcissism and narcissistic abuse where I cover this. They don't, what they do is not, they don't behave in logical, rational ways, okay? Because they're entity influenced, and they don't necessarily know that entities are influencing their behavior, which is why a lot of the time their behavior doesn't make sense and doesn't even serve them. Where was I going with this? Yeah, so you need to take some time to vet a man, okay? When I first met Dom, if you guys are new to my channel, okay, I recently met my soulmate, coming up to 2 years ago now. I met my soulmate very soon after I was coming out of a 6-year relationship in which I had been treated like a placeholder. I was constantly being promised that the relationship was going somewhere, but it wasn't. And then I found out after 6 years that the person was cheating on me with dozens and dozens of women. Okay, and very soon after that, I got out of that relationship and met my soulmate. And we got engaged. We started talking about, okay, this is where I want to add some nuance, okay? We started talking about marriage very early on in our relationship, probably within the first couple of months, okay? I don't know exactly when, but, you know, it wasn't like we were seriously like, oh, let's get married. But the discussion was floated. Obviously, we knew that we were both looking for something serious. We weren't looking to kind of just try things out and see where things go. We were looking for our end game. We were looking for our one. And we had a very strong feeling that was what this was. That doesn't mean that we got engaged right away. Okay, we got engaged after... was it a year? We got engaged in November last year. So it was like almost a year and a half of dating that we got engaged, because you both need to vet each other. You both need to make sure that, yes, this, even if you're sure, like even if you feel sure, you're always going to feel sure, especially with a narcissist, because they're going to mirror you. Okay. And especially if you're a person who shares who you are quite openly online, narcissists will study you. And that's exactly what everybody is saying, that Landon obviously must have studied her, because she's been sharing her life online for 10 years, I think it is, where she's been sharing her vulnerabilities, her weak points, what she looks for in a man. Now, obviously, Landon is also was a big YouTube influencer, so that helps with you vetting them. You have to be able to vet them as well, okay? Because what narcissists will do is, when you're getting to know them, they will mirror you. So if you have certain values, like Liz is into manifestation, he's like, oh, I'm also into manifestation. Is that something that he actually displays on his online persona, or is he just revealing it now? Like, if she's like, oh, wow, I didn't know, because you don't openly talk about that. Well, he could just be making it up. He could just be saying it because she's into that, and so he's trying to make her feel like they have this soulmate connection and this is some spiritually predestined meeting. And spiritual women are particularly vulnerable to this kind of thing, where, oh my god, I've met my soulmate, and oh my god, he looks just like me, and a lot of the things that she was saying, and that just cause this cosmic alignment. And look, a lot of that stuff can be real, okay? It can be real when you meet your soulmate, that you'll have... I had a dream about Dom before I met him, but there can also be spiritual synchronicities and things like that with karmic interfaces, or false twins, or just malevolent, narcissists and abusers, because of spirit influence, negative entity influence, okay? It's called alien love bite, or astral tagging, or astral love bites. I've spoken about it in other previous videos, so if you want to go deeper into that, watch my other videos on that. And you can feel like there's some cosmic alignment happening, and this is your one true soulmate, but it's actually demons fucking with the both of you. So yeah, in general, yeah, you know, she has every right to give out advice online, but let's be careful to not put her on a pedestal, not put anyone on a pedestal, okay? Because putting someone on a pedestal is a very dehumanizing thing. And I know that she does invite that because, you know, unfortunately for Liz, and this is very common with people who've been through narcissistic abuse, I speak from experience, that we can adopt some narcissistic traits, or we have narcissistic traits in our shadows that need to be integrated and brought back into wholeness, okay? And those aren't necessarily always bad things, okay? Sometimes just prioritizing yourself, putting yourself first, before you start bleeding out energy and being a people pleaser and doing things for other people with unspoken expectations, like a lot of people pleasers tend to do. Yeah, that's actually quite a toxic codependent trait. It's shadow narcissism. When you're doing things for others and expecting that they're going to do those things back for you without any without, you know, clearly managing expectations up front, that is a toxic trait and you need to stop doing it. So yeah, I mean, I like Liz. I find her very funny. I find her very entertaining and strangely endearing. You know, she is very funny. She's confident. She's obviously got a lot of blind spots and a lot of things that she needs to work on. But, you know, for those of us who've actually done our shadow work, and we know that none of us are perfect, we all have stuff that we need to work on. It's much easier to look at somebody who's got clearly some issues that they need to work on and not hate them for that, and still be able to be kind. Yeah, so I would say that it is a little bit of a cautionary tale in not blowing up too quickly before you've done the deeper work, unless you can handle the fallout and the backlash. So Liz obviously blew up huge, 8 million subscribers. For me personally, I would not be comfortable with that level of scrutiny. And when I was going through my process, I didn't start sharing advice online until I probably started making YouTube videos when I was probably around the age that she is now. So about 25, 26. And I'm now just turned 41. So I started sharing, you know, not advice. I started sharing my healing journey and what had helped me around, I would say, maybe 28, when I first went vegan, and I was sharing, you know, the lifestyle changes and the health changes that I was going through, and the spiritual changes. But then I didn't start doing deeper, you know, like coaching and healing type of stuff until, I mean, it was kind of gradual. I mean, seriously, when I was like in my mid-30s. But maybe softly around the age of, because she's not doing direct coaching, she just gives advice online, but I don't think she does one-on-ones or anything like that. So I started taking one-on-ones when I was around 34, 35, and I still had work to do, and I knew that I had work to do, okay? That's the self-awareness that comes with going through a few dark nights of the soul, where you realize that everything that you knew was kind of distorted and wrong, and you come to a new level of awakening. You think you found all the answers, and then you go around preaching it to everyone. And I went through that too, but I didn't have a massive platform like what she had. I had a decently sized one at that time, but I was mainly only talking about it over on Facebook. This was back in the day when Facebook was actually like the platform. But anyway, that's a story for another time. That was me kind of going through my spiritual awakening and turning into a hardcore activist after I just, you know, got manifested this Vogue cover, and I'd done really well in my career. And I then started realizing that the world is a mess and we need to do something about it. So multiple dark nights of the soul. And it meant that when I did actually start giving out advice online, I was able to just be a little bit more nuanced. Not always. I mean, definitely I've had moments where I'm like, this is the truth. And, you know, when I went through my feminine embodiment era and feminine energy era, I was definitely like, oh, it's all about feminine energy. But I did understand the deeper layers, that it wasn't just about feminine, it's about divine feminine, which is the marrying of the masculine principle. So both those energies need to come into balance. You know, that's obviously a whole different topic. I mean, I do have some notes about that here. But yeah, I think the way, you know, she's obviously crashing out in a few ways. Like, she wrote some really nasty comment to Albina from The Privileged Few when Albina made a video about her. And Albina wasn't saying anything bad about her. She was just, you know, updating people on the tea, basically. Like, this is what's happened. And Liz wrote a really nasty comment saying, oh my God, you're obsessed with me. Like, go read a book or something. And that was not very classy. Like, to me, that's somebody who's very dysregulated and has probably been receiving people's projections all day long. And so at that point, when your nervous system is so activated and you've been dealing with people's hate comments and projections, anybody directing anything towards you, even any light critique, can feel like a barrage of attacks. So, you know, that obviously wasn't great, but I can understand, because, you know, I've dealt with trolls before. You know, when I've had like little pieces of content go viral and suddenly everyone starts attacking you because they misunderstood something that you said, or they have no fucking clue what you were even talking about, but they think they've interpreted it through their lens of their own whatever biases. Yeah, so Liz has a real vulnerability around needing a man to be obsessed with her. This is a shadow narcissistic quality. So obviously I feel like this comes from a mixture of severe narcissistic abuse that she experienced, probably from her father, maybe from growing up as an immigrant, and then needing to kind of, you know, prove herself, and just an unintegrated shadow around needing to feel special and better than everyone else. And it is obviously created a real vulnerability to being love bombed by a narcissist like Landon. Yeah, so other narcissistic qualities involve, you know, like looking at potential partners, men in this example, as walking ATMs, or just looking at them in terms of like what they can do for you. And I understand, for somebody that is a recovering people pleaser that always did for others without thinking about, you know, what they could receive in return, I can understand why, as they're healing from this, they would flip the other way and be like, well, now I'm going to approach men to see what they can do for me because I'm worth it and I deserve it and I'm goddess. And there's a point at which we all go through that. I've been through that as well. But that's basically narcissistic shadow work. At a certain point, you need to come out of that and realize that having a healthy relationship and eventually a divine unification with your one true soulmate is about both of you working together, not just to help each other and to love on each other, but to serve God through your union. And falling in love with somebody because of what they're doing for you is also pretty narcissistic. You're supposed to fall in love with somebody, yes, partly because of what they're doing for you, because if they're not doing jack shit for you, then yeah, you should be turned off by that. But you fall in love with them because of who they are, their character, their morals, what they're here to bring to the world. That's how you end up you cut through the noise of all the different high value men and eligible bachelors, of which I'm sure there are many, but they're not all going to be right for you. They're not all supposed to be your husband. You can't just pick from whoever you want, because there's one person that's designed for you, and that's the person whose templating matches what you're supposed to do here. And yeah, that's completely unique to you, because your soul's blueprint is as unique as a fingerprint. And so your soulmate, who you're supposed to do your divine mission with, is also going to have the corresponding matching blueprint to fit yours. Okay, yeah, so let's talk about her jumping in literally 4 months to a relationship and getting pregnant to a man that she wasn't even married to yet, and hadn't vetted. She basically, there's no way you can properly vet someone in 4 months, but can we, especially with everything that's happening right now, all the gender warfare, you know, all the red pill content, manosphere, all of that stuff, porn programming, all of this stuff is psychological warfare designed to target our gender principle, our Chrysophia union template. Okay, that's the merging of the divine masculine and the divine feminine in the higher heart. Okay, it literally attacks this template in the light body and creates warfare between those two energies. Okay, and making us feel like we have to be at odds with each other. That's not how we were organically designed. We were organically designed to work together. Okay, but that doesn't mean that you just go blindly trusting any masculine who's showing up. Okay, you need to properly vet these men. Okay, because firstly, not all of them are going to be right for you. Only one of them is going to be right for you. And secondly, a lot of them are problematic. Okay, so, you know, looking at who they're following on Instagram and who's following them, like what their social media activity is like, that should be something that you're doing with every guy that you're talking to. Okay, if he's following loads of OnlyFans accounts or like women who are, you know, objectifying themselves a lot, then that's a thirsty dude. Okay, that's a man that lacks sexual discipline, and that's probably not somebody that you want to be dealing with if you're looking for a serious monogamous relationship. Okay, that's a lustful man. Secondly, can we normalize doing background checks on men, especially if you're dealing with cross-cultural relationships? Okay, I'm from the UK, Dom is from the US. When we first started talking, I was in Mexico and he flew me to go and see him. Now, this is a high-risk behavior. Okay, I'm fully willing to acknowledge that this is a high-risk behavior. In my world, it's very common. Okay, if you're new here, I've been an international model for 20 years, and many women and young girls in my industry will travel all over the world, meet men in different markets, start talking to them, and then travel to the next place, you know, because a lot of the time girls are only doing 3 months in each season and then moving on. So they might have multiple suitors that they're talking to in different markets. So it can be very common for some of these guys, because especially, you know, a woman who is an international model and has been on magazine covers and in campaigns and things like that adds a lot of status to a man's life. So a lot of these guys, even if they're not high net worth, will offer to fly you out, okay, to come and see them, to get to know them. Okay, this is a high risk behavior, ladies. Okay, those of us who have been in that world, we know, we've heard all the stories about horror stories of girls getting flown out and bad things happening. Okay, you need to be doing background checks on these guys. Okay, firstly, you shouldn't just be flying out when you don't really know him. You should have been talking to him for a number of months to properly vet him and find out about his character, his morals, look at his online presence. If he doesn't have an online presence, then that's a concern. It can be a green flag, but it can also be a concern, okay, for depending on what his reasons are for not having an online presence. But definitely do a background check, okay? There's websites that you can go to, like Truth Finder, for example. I think it might only be US based. I did a Truth Finder search on Dom before I flew out to see him. He knows, he's completely fine with it. If a man has a problem with you doing, I mean, you don't need to tell him right away. You obviously don't tell him right away, but you know, if things work out and you end up together, you can tell him. And if he has a problem with the fact that you did a background search on him, then that's a huge red flag and he needs to go in the bin. Okay, it's a smart decision for you as a woman to be taking your safety seriously, because you don't know who the fuck this guy is. Okay, he could be a serial killer. So background checks will tell you if they're married. It will tell you if they have like CCJs, or you know, if they have any criminal records. A CCJs, but it might just be a UK term. It basically means if they owe money and somebody's taken them to court for money that they owe. It will tell you if they own property or if they used to own property. It will tell you their registered addresses. It will tell you if there are registered sex offenders in the neighborhood where they live. It will also tell you if they are a registered sex offender. It will even show you information about their family. So you can find out if their family have criminal records and things like that. And that should also be an important thing that you look into, because knowing what type of family they come from is also important. So yeah, and if you're in the UK, You can contact, if you're dealing with a guy from the UK, you can contact the Metropolitan Police. I think that's just in London. You can contact the regional police and ask to do a Clare's Law? I believe it's a Clare's Law, which was named after a young woman named Claire who was murdered by either a partner or a former partner or a potential partner. And so what it is the police will basically give you give you a background check on whether this person has had any domestic incident complaints filed against them. Okay, even if nothing came to court, even if no charges were filed, even if there were no convictions or anything like that, if the police were even called, they will tell you. And if you have children, it's highly important that you do a Sarah's Law, which was named after Sarah Payne, who was a little girl who was sadly murdered by a paedophile around the time that I was a kid, actually. And it's the same, but anything involving children. This is extremely important, guys, okay? Now, obviously, that just because a man has a clean background, and doesn't have any complaints made against him doesn't mean that he's going to be safe either. There can still be problems. So you need to make sure, if you're going to another country to see a guy, that you have enough money to fly out of there if you need to. Make sure you have enough money to get a hotel room. If you need to get a hotel room, if you need to leave his place and stay in a hotel for a couple of nights and then get a flight out of there, because anything can go wrong. So, and I hope it doesn't need to be said, but clearly in Liz's case, there are women who think that this is a good idea. Do not be giving birth in a country in which you are not citizen or resident, where you do not have where you have an uncertain immigration status, and where you are having problems with the baby daddy. Okay, this is extremely high risk behavior that Liz has engaged in. And yeah, it's concerning. Okay, now, again, I don't want to be victim blaming, but I do wish that she had done proper research, okay? Because the US right now is very politically volatile. It's not super safe for immigrants. It's not super safe for women. And maybe she thought that, with her money, she would be safe. But, obviously with the situation that she has now, where she can't get her child out of the country, and she can't currently return to the country, it's a really unfortunate situation. I do think that the law needs to be changed, because these laws are extremely patriarchal. I don't think that a father should have equal say over whether a mother is allowed to take her infant child out of the country, especially if he has been shown to be abusive. If you've been following the story, you'll know that he now has a domestic violence record because he assaulted her. She also has a domestic violence record because she assaulted him. She assaulted him because she found that he had made AI porn of her. So he's a sexual predator as well. And he has a history of abusing his previous girlfriend and a history of cheating. Not just attempting to cheat with one girl on TikTok, but as it's now emerged, there were 10 other girls that he was cheating on Liz with. So to me, this is a sociopath. He should not be around women or children, okay? Cheating is abuse. It's sexual abuse. I actually think that it should be considered a sexual crime, because if you're lying to somebody, pretending that you're monogamous, and you're actually going around sleeping with loads of other people, you're putting your partner's health at risk, and they're not consenting. Like, if you're basically using fraud to pretend to be a different person so that you can sleep with somebody, that's considered a sexual crime. But if you're pretending to be a loyal, honest person who's being, not cheating, right, that's also fraud. That should be a sexual crime. So we've got a long way to go when it comes to like the law and women's rights. So yeah, I am sympathetic to her, because you would think that you would be able to have a baby in a country and then take your baby with you. You would think, right? But, unfortunately, the US is a fucking shit show when it comes to human rights. So I've got here in my notes, that when she met him, she probably thought, oh, he's into manifestation too. He's spiritual, therefore that equals good guy. Okay, trust me, I'm not mocking her. She would not be the first person to think this, okay? I've definitely made the mistake of thinking that if a guy is into energies or he's spiritual, he likes crystals, that means that he's a good guy, okay? When I was younger and much more naive, okay? To you younger girls out there, just because a guy is spiritual does not mean he's a good guy, okay? New age communities, spiritual communities, of which I have been immersed in many. I've lived in Ubud, I've lived in Mexico, in Ubud in Bali. I'm pretty tapped in with the consciousness community here in the UK. You know, my fiance lives in Sarasota, which obviously has a big conscious community, although I didn't really get too involved in that scene. But yeah, I've been around a lot of conscious communities and spiritual communities and digital nomad enclaves and things like that. And a lot of them have a lot of spiritual people. We, you know, ecstatic dances and cacao ceremonies and yoga and all of this stuff. Okay, these places are teeming with predators. They are teeming with new age fuckboys. Okay, in fact, probably more predators than any other space, okay? Like maybe, you know, you'll find also abusers in like church and stuff like that. I don't know, it just seems like it's just, the problem just seems like it doesn't matter which community you go to, it's just men. Like men are being targeted into being predators. Let me clarify that. I do think that there is a deliberate attempt by dark negative forces, whether you want to call those, you know, demonic forces, you know, in the ethers, in the you know, in the other dimensions, that are targeting humanity with a specific agenda to promote sexual and relational misery. You know, some people want to go even deeper and say it's negative aliens doing this to us, or it's the government, or it's ancient Babylonian cults and the Illuminati. I don't know, okay? I can't say for sure exactly who it is. It's probably a little bit of all of it. But I do think that, yes, there is definitely some nefarious forces that want to see humanity suffering, that want to see men and women just hating on each other and hurting each other. Mostly men hurting women, because this is a feminine energy planet, and there is womb harvesting happening on the planet, because the womb is very powerful portal for creation, okay, and it's heavily targeted by demonic forces. And if they're able to split the gender principle between man and woman and turn our protectors into predators, so that we no longer trust them, so that they no longer trust us, so that they're no longer protecting us, then dark forces can kind of get in a lot more easily. I'll talk about that in another video, because that's going really deep and esoteric now. But I do think that also the situation that we're seeing with Liz is a cautionary tale in not listening too closely to some of this Kabbalah law of assumption bullshit, okay? I'm not saying that there isn't some truth in it, but it is an incomplete and distorted system, okay? It's very difficult for me to kind of distill this, because it does involve years of study, and I'm only just beginning to crack the code of the inverted tree of life, okay, and haven't even fully begun to fully understand what the true organic 12 tree of life is. And I don't want to get too esoteric right now, because I'm worried that I might lose people, but this whole idea that you're the operant power in your reality, you can dictate everything that happens to you. If somebody's being a dickhead in your life, then you can change them. There's so much wrong with this, okay? I tested this out in my own life, and it blew up spectacularly in my face. And then I came and started to align to the truth, okay? I thought that I could decide, I could pick my own soulmate, and I could change him into who I wanted him to be, okay? That's not true, okay? You can't just change people into who they want to be. There is some truth to it. All truths are but half truths, okay? So they say in the Kabbalion Hermetic philosophy. all truths are but half truths. There's truth in everything. Even some of these systems that are inverted, or that they've basically dark forces have, hijacked a lot of these original organic systems like Kabbalah, and put one version out to the masses and then kept the true one for themselves in some of these secret societies, right? So there is some truth that if you see someone as their higher self, say you've got, somebody that you're dealing with in your life who's very narcissistic and, very damaged and a horrible, hateful, manipulative person. And if you just start to visualize them in your mind as their healed version, yes, that can actually start to transform the person. Or, maybe you have somebody in your life who you love, a family member or a friend who's always having problems. They've got so many distortions, so many overlays, so much trauma that they're working through. And you're keeping that version alive of them if you keep on seeing them in their unhealed, broken state. Okay, I definitely have had this with people in my life where I kept on recreating that version of them as this unhealed, broken person, because I was getting a sense of self-importance from them always needing me and always coming to me for advice and for healing. And I was just like, I need to stop creating this version of them. And because I was testing out the Kabbalah, I was like, let me try and see them as their healed version, as their higher self version. And it did actually start to heal them. And one of them in particular, I was actually doing sessions with her, and she's completely transformed her life. And she's like literally got everything that she ever wanted out of life. But I tried it on other people as well, people in my life who I really loved and who were having a lot of blocks and a lot of just crucifixion, wounding and targeting and demonic targeting and just challenges that were blocking them. So I started seeing them as their higher self, and they started to rise and started to heal. Because ultimately, when you're trying to manifest, if you have to keep on going against God's divine will and doing repeated affirmations because you're trying to manifest an ego-based desire, you're going to have to keep on doing that and using that energy to try and hold that. Okay, that's what we call black magic or dark magic or baneful magic that basically is going against natural law. But if you're manifesting with God, it becomes so much easier. I don't even really manifest anymore. I just submit to God's will, and everything unfolds. So it doesn't mean to say that there aren't challenges. I've had immense targeting and challenges since I really started to submit to God, but I've had massive blessings as well. So it's one of those things, and the challenges will usually correspond to wounds that you need to basically work on and clean up from your light body. Okay, like crucifixion wounds and fears around showing up and sharing your voice and your medicine with the world. And sometimes they can be initiations. Okay, I do feel like Liz is going through a very powerful initiation right now, and if she pivots this well, she could turn out to become even more powerful if she basically takes the lesson from this. But at the moment, this is the harm in being very, very polarizing and very, very sure about what you're saying, and not making room for nuance. Okay, because the advice that we give out openly to everyone isn't going to work in everyone's case. Okay, because we're all unique and we're all here to do different things, right? If you want how to do magic that aligns with divine will, or affirmations, for example, if you want to do affirmations that align with divine will, it's called prayer. Prayer is basically magic that aligns with God's will. You can also add ritual elements to it as well. A lot of different religious communities will do rituals and offerings and things like that with prayers and blessings. So the way that you do it is that you do the offering to either the Most High or to an emanation or a fractal, with deity work, for example. I know some people who practice magic like to work with deities. You want to make sure that you're working with a deity that is still connected to the Godhead, okay? Not a disembodied deity that's decided that it is its own God and doesn't submit to the law of one. Okay, this is where it can become problematic, and you can get, negative karmic consequences and backlash, and things can just start going missing, or some of your stuff can get stolen. It can really, trust me, I fucked around with magic and I found out. So yeah, now I just work with the Godhead. I'm not against doing rituals. I think, you know, rituals, blessings, offerings are beautiful, but just make sure that you're always submitted to that Godhead. Yeah, okay, this is not very flattering what I've written here, but I do think that Liz is a bit of a bad case of more money than sense. Okay, she's obviously been able to sort out one of the biggest issues in her life, which was lack of financial abundance, and been able to create a lot of abundance, not just for herself but for her family too, and she absolutely deserves it. Okay, and that's admirable. Okay, that's really admirable. She's achieved a lot more than a lot of us who are sitting here discussing her. So I'm not trying to like be disparaging about her, but she has been making some rookie mistakes, because I think the money, she's felt like the money can kind of give you a bit too much overconfidence and cause you to think that you have more protection than you actually do. So yeah, she's being just a little bit brazen, and I think a little bit more fear. She kind of is a little bit too fearless sometimes. And I think if she'd had a little, you know, people who don't have as much money, they tend to be a little bit more cautious and plan things out in advance. And definitely you can get into a place where you just stay stuck in the planning stage for too long, and your life just ends up passing you by. And what I do like about Liz is she takes action. She promotes taking action, but she's just taking action and just going for things and having audacity and making all kinds of blunders. And it's not just fucking with her own life right now, it's also messing with her child's life. So I think a little bit more caution, a little bit more preparedness, a little bit more fear would hold her in good stead. And also seeking counsel from somebody a little bit older and wiser than her, because I don't know who she's seeking counsel from. I hope it's not just Shira 7, because Shira 7 has got her own issues. Not that I don't dislike Shira 7 either. You know, if you guys know me, I got heavily into her content for a while, but she is very toxic, and I don't agree. I agree with some of her messaging, but overall her message I think is quite toxic. So yeah. Yeah, so try not to make expensive mistakes, assuming you can buy your way out of them later. Abusive men will 100% use your children to try and fuck with you, especially if he's trying to continually be in a relationship with her. And my assumption is, I know that like people who've been following this are like, oh, she's full of shit. She said that she broke up with him, and then he posts a picture of them all like cozy together. I think that she is in a coercively controlling relationship with him at this point. I think that mentally and emotionally she's checked out, but I think strategically she's having to play the game where she's allowing him to think that there's still a chance so that he plays nice. Okay, I think that she's got herself into a really abusive situation, and she has my deepest sympathy. I think that's the game that she's playing right now. I don't think they're actually in a relationship, but I think she's allowing him to think that they might be, so that he doesn't harm her or her child, and so that he kind of plays nice. And yeah, that's unfortunately, I completely understand. I completely understand where she's coming from with that. Yeah, so 3 to 4 months, too early to get to know somebody. Yes, within 6 months, a man knows if he wants to marry you, but if he's proposing to you in 6 months, that's too early, okay? You guys should be discussing this, okay? He shouldn't just be surprising you out of nowhere. You guys should be talking about marriage and be on the same page about your readiness, okay? And if you're not ready, you need to say, let's just wait a little bit. Okay, sometimes some guys are keen to lock it down. If a guy's really into you and obsessed with you, he'll be keen to lock it down. But that doesn't mean that you can accept the proposal, but that doesn't mean that you need to rush to get married right away. Definitely don't be having his baby before you're married. Making a man a father is literally the highest honor. It's the highest initiation that you can bestow on a man. Okay, we have so lost what this means. Okay, you as a woman allowing a man to use your body as a temple to gestate his seed, that is such a sacred gift. And women are not even asking for the bare minimum to bestow a man with this. Okay, we should, I mean, I love the video that YV edit, you guys follow her, made about this, where she was talking about this woman who was in a 50-50 relationship with this man, and then they were planning a family together, and then she ran the numbers and realized it would cost her 50 grand in, you know, the amount that she would lose in terms of her career and financial advantage to have this baby, and medical costs and things like that. So she presented him, she's like, I'm happy to have this baby for you, but since we're 50-50, you need to pay me 50 grand. And he was like disgusted. He was like, I can't believe that she's expecting me to pay her 50 grand to have the baby. And I love her breakdown of it, because she was like, these dudes aren't really 50-50. They're 50-50 when it suits them, but when you actually ask for your half, then they're nowhere to be found. Then they're not interested. Okay, so you can't ever be 50-50 with a guy, because you're the one that's going to have to be, you know, bearing the child, breastfeeding, taking time off from work, and all of that stuff. Okay, and added to that, usually it's a woman who's carrying the mental load, not just of the household, but even just the vision, the mission, what you guys are doing together. It's usually you that's going to be doing that, because of our auricular gifts and how we just are. And personally, I think that that's as it should be. So we need to be expecting more from men, because that's a gift, and that's something that men seek. Okay, they seek out in women. Men who know what's up, they are vetting you for that. So you need to start seeing the value in that. Okay, you are worthy. Okay, so, you know, all the sprinkle girls, I completely get where you're coming from with that. Okay, because we need to be asking for more. Not just in terms of like finances, but just in terms of labor, okay? Because there's so much unpaid labor that we do as women. And if you want to actually instead of doing all that unpaid labor, turn your focus towards something that actually gets you paid, then you need to be expecting him to step up in those areas, like such as, you know, housework and, you know, all of that stuff. But we can talk about that in another video. Okay, so just to understand, you know, the ancient temples of the goddess, the original mystery school temples of Ishtar and Inanna, men would have to go through the greatest trials and tribulations. They would have to meditate outside these temples for years in devotion to the goddess, to the sacred feminine principle, to prove themselves worthy to even get a look at the priestess, let alone lie in bed with her. And some of us are just opening our legs for, you know, what was Liz saying? She was just like, you know, people saying, oh, she folded for 10K. She was like, babe, you fold for a good morning text. Okay, 10K or a good morning text, neither of those are good enough. Okay, a man needs to prove himself worthy through, not just financially, okay, he needs to prove himself worthy through just his devotion, okay, not just to you, but to God, to mission, to humanity. You know, you need to be vetting him on his character, his integrity, his morals, okay, how much work he's done on himself, how emotionally safe he is, okay, how much he's integrated his own feminine, how much he understands how vulnerable you are as a woman, and also just the value that you add to his life, okay? And if you're a woman who's created something for yourself, some financial abundance, some property, investments, you need to have a solid prenup. And I would even recommend not just a prenup, but like, I do think I've been looking into some of the ideas that the Islamic tradition has around the nikah, which is basically a marriage contract, where a woman will stipulate exactly what her terms are, what she wants, okay? And you can write anything in that. And I think that that's something that should be normalized. I think it should be adopted more widely. Yeah, again, I've written about, I don't understand why she gave birth in the US system, because firstly, the US doesn't have the best healthcare. Secondly, it's extremely expensive. I don't understand why she did that. This is what I'm talking about, more money than sense. Okay, if she's resident in Belgium, I'm sure Belgium has a better healthcare system. And it's probably free, right? I could be wrong about that, but I feel like most of Europe, we have free healthcare, and probably there's private options as well if she doesn't want to go the, you know, the social medicine route. And I understand somebody with her finances would probably want slightly better care. Why not just go private? You know, there's incredible complications with giving birth on US soil, because then the child becomes an American citizen and the father has equal paternal rights, and you don't have any rights as a citizen. So she's kind of fucked herself with that. I really don't know what she was thinking. So with the background of this, she was in Belgium when she found out that he cheated, but her cats and her stuff was still with him. So she was like, can you please send me my stuff? Please send me the cats. And he wouldn't. He refused. He was holding them hostage. So she had to kind of go over there to get her stuff, play nice, probably try and, you know, think that he had a chance and try and do some fake reconciliation in order to try and get her cats. I think she probably ended up getting back with him so that she could get access to the cats and her stuff, and then decided, you know, he probably ended up, I understand how abusive relationships work, okay, because I've been in several of them. So probably by that point, he started playing nice, love bombed her again. She decided to stay there, bought a house, bought a car, and then ended up giving birth there. And now she can't get her baby out of the country. So yeah, it's really unfortunate. And this whole situation with giving his mum money and paying for his mum's accommodation, that, like, it's just, that's some serious boundary issues. Okay, she's letting herself get walked all over. Okay, I kind of understand how it happened, because probably if she had ended up back in a relationship with him and now that's her baby's grandmother, and so she doesn't want to be completely cold-hearted. But these people sound really fucking manipulative. Yeah, so with the harsh dating advice that she gives, where she's like literally yelling at people and calling people a clown for doing this, a lot of people are rightfully mocking her now, because they're just like, you literally mocked your audience, but yet you're doing the same stuff. When you're seeing somebody having such a strong reaction to somebody else's behavior, that's because that person's triggering something that's unintegrated within that person. Okay, so the people that she's talking to, the younger girls that she's talking to, are triggering the younger unhealed version of herself that was still doing that. And because she hasn't healed that that younger version of herself, she's still continuing to act that out. Okay, so she's basically shouting at herself. She's shouting at her unhealed. She needs to do inner child healing. Okay, that's one of the modalities that I do with my clients one-on-one. She needs to do some inner child healing and some shadow integration, and probably some soul retrieval as well, and reintegrate all of those lost parts of herself back into wholeness. Yeah, we often react harshly to others when we haven't yet found compassion for our own past self. So showing compassion to that younger version of yourself that acted like that when she didn't know any better is going to be crucial for her to heal that part of herself, stop playing that out, and also speak to her audience with more compassion. I know that some people actually find that tough love approach to be very empowering and activating, but it's also doing her brand some damage, because it is quite polarizing. Okay, so, and she is internally polarized, that tough exterior, while she's actually still quite soft and not good boundaries inside. That's a sign of her being internally polarized. Okay, that's something that happens to people with narcissistic abuse, where they flip from, you know, narcissism to codependency, or masculine to feminine, and switching polarities. Okay, and that can be healed through embodiment practices. Okay, like kriyas and breath work. Okay, I teach that in my course Reclaim Your Crown, if you're interested in checking that out. That basically brings your internal polarities into the central column, aligns you back to God, and you're able to give yourself more compassion and embody that compassion for others as well. Okay, so I think I'm going to wrap up and leave it there. I do have lots more notes actually, so I could keep talking about this, but I feel like for today I'm trying to make my transmissions not go on for too long. If you guys want, I can do a part 2, and I can kind of talk about this go a little bit deeper into it. So if you want me to do that, leave me a comment and let me know if you'd like to see a part 2 where we can go deeper into kind of healing and embodiment and how we can actually, you know, use this as a cautionary tale to not make the same mistakes. So yeah, either leave me a comment or smash the like button, and I'll do a part 2 talking about this with kind of broader themes, and maybe some more details will emerge. But yeah, that's it for today, and I hope you guys are doing great wherever you are. If you want to book a session with me, description, that's all the information will be in the description box. For those of you that wanted to join a space to be held, I have not announced the date, a date for another cohort, but you can fill out an interest application form and register your interest and join the waiting list. So if you'd like to be considered for the next time I run it, I'll leave the link in the description box below as well. All right, my loves, take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out. One love.